Hello, my name is Barbara Lucas, and welcome to another edition of The Green Room, a collaboration between Washtenaw County and Ann Arbor's Community Television Network. Last month, we were talking with Michael Garfield, the Executive Director of the Ecology Center, and we were talking about how the anniversary of the Ecology Center and Earth Day are both 50 years ago. And we got started with some of the very early programs that the Ecology Center had. And now we'd like to move into more detail about for instance, the legislative, lobbying type of work, that kind of thing. So Michael, welcome to the show. Here you are again.
It's great to be back, Barbara.
We're going to start out with the 1976 bottle bill. Tell us how you were involved and what that bill means to us here in Michigan.
The bottle bill was passed in 1976, and so it's before my time, but as I understand the story, the Ecology Center and other activists helped create a local bottle bill in Ann Arbor and use that as a way of encouraging state activists to begin organizing to campaign for a statewide initiative. That was adopted with overwhelming approval by state voters way back in 1976.
And I guess we have like the highest deposit, 10 cents of anywhere in the country. How do you think that impacts it?
It makes it more successful than anywhere in the country. Michigan has recovery rates well over 90%.
Wow.
They forgot to put an inflation escalator on it. If they had done that, we'd be around 98, 99%. It's been going down a little over the years.
Well, that bill's pretty well known, but a lesser known bill is the Michigan's Right to Know law, which I guess the Ecology Center helped get. Tell us about that.
Some people remember that there was an enormous chemical disaster in India in the 1980s at a pesticide plant in Bhopal. At the time, people around the world were worried about industrial accidents, and activists in the United States started organizing to create emergency preparedness plans for a chemical disaster. In Washtenaw County, the Ecology Center helped to create a county pollution prevention ordinance, which was used to encourage the state of Michigan to pass its own right to know law. And we worked with labor activists who were interested in protecting workers from toxic chemicals, along with the community members who were concerned about air pollution, water pollution coming out of factories. And that served as a grounding and coalition building between labor and environmental organizations in Michigan. It was some of the early coalition building, blue-green coalition building that has been done in the state, because toxic pollution problems are usually first a problem of worker health and safety before they become problems of community air pollution and water pollution.
Which brings me to, you do a lot of coalition building, right? With faith groups and all kinds of, how does that help? What's the tie-in between these different groups?
Well, environmental issues affect different groups of people differently, and it affects some people much worse than it affects other people. We've found that it doesn't make sense to work on environmental issues without seeing the connections to human health issues, to racial justice issues, to worker health and safety issues, and issues that tend to get siloed in different different nonprofit organizations and advocacy organizations. So we've tried to build coalitions wherever possible with other social movements and help that multiply our impact and make our voices louder and stronger, but also because we see that as a part, as a key part of how we define environmental issues. They're health and justice issues too.
There's also the first energy law that Michigan had that you advocated. Tell us about that.
I think in the 2000s, people were starting to become aware of climate change, and I mean, people had been aware, scientists had been aware of climate of climate change since the late 1950s, but it became a political issue, a widely known public issue and political issue in the 2000s. And in 2008, when Jennifer Granholm was governor of the state of Michigan, environmental advocates campaigned for a clean energy bill in Michigan. And the Ecology Center led those efforts to create the first clean energy standard, which mandated that Michigan utilities provide a minimum portion of their power to come from renewable sources and to invest money in energy efficiency in those efforts. It was the first clean energy law in Michigan. It was passed in 2008.
And do you think it's been successful?
The utilities met the mandates before they were required to, and each and every time the law has been evaluated, the price of clean energy has come in lower than anticipated. The law was updated in 2016. It could stand further updating, but it's been extremely successful. Michigan's got to go a lot further because at this point we lag behind the rest of the country. And given what we know about the climate crisis, we have little time to pass aggressive and visionary climate legislation at the state level. But we're going to need a change of mind and a change of hearts in Lansing to make that happen.
And speaking of climate change, we often hear about how sprawl contributes because there's so much vehicle traffic, vehicle miles traveled, and the work of the Ecology Center on land use starting in the 2000s. Can you tell us about, for instance, the Greenbelt program that you pushed for?
I really appreciate you making those connections too between climate and land use and those other issues. In the 1990s, we campaigned with the Sierra Club and a number of other groups to pass land preservation programs and ordinances in Washtenaw County. That led to the formation of the Washtenaw County Natural Areas Program, the Ann Arbor Greenbelt Program, and other land preservation programs in the region. At the time, those were highly controversial programs, but they've become very widely accepted and successful and have helped save almost 10,000 acres of the best farmland and natural areas in Washtenaw County. And to bring it up to the current day, we have continued to look at land use issues more recently and look at other things that need to be done. In the last decade, we have worked with Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti leaders to develop an expanded transit service in Washtenaw County, the service that's offered in Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti Township, and Scioto Township by the ride, and to try to create a regional transit system, well-funded regional transit system that serves all of Metro Detroit and Washtenaw County. That still needs some work to be done. And there are a whole lot of other links between land use, climate, air quality, and sustainability that still need attention. And we're pushing away at all those on all those fronts. There's still a lot of changes that need to happen in our community, in our region, to make this a more sustainable and livable place.
And the fact that if you have good bus transportation, you can live without perhaps 2 cars in a household. You can go down to 1, which is what's happened in our house because my husband can take the bus to work. And that makes me think about how if you have 1 less car, you have more money for rent or in general in your budget. So in a sense, it's an affordable housing plus.
Transportation is the second the second biggest line item in most households' budgets, and if you can save on travel, on car ownership, on car travel, it's gonna save you a lot of money and allow for other things you might need to spend that money on.
Speaking of cars, we've got your Healthy Cars campaign that you started was in 2006. What was that about?
we were looking at air and water pollution in the Great Lakes, and one of the biggest contributors was auto manufacturing,
Hmm.
all parts of it. The car is one of the most complicated production processes and manufacturing processes out there. And we started testing cars for toxic chemicals to see if they could be made in safer ways, and were being made in safer ways by some manufacturers. That community science work that we started then led us to test other consumer products for the presence of toxic chemicals, and it led us to create what we call the Healthy Stuff program, which tests a whole long list of consumer products for the presence of lead, mercury, phthalates, brominated flame retardants, PFAS chemicals, and other chemicals of concern, to try to move them out of commerce, to find safer ways to make consumer products.
I read over 10,000 or approaching 10,000 different products you've been testing. It's amazing.
We started out testing cars, and we tested toys. We started testing children's products, from child car seats to crib mattresses.
Huh.
We've tested building materials, yard and garden equipment, and food containers,
Mm.
just to mention a few.
Mhm.
But there is a huge consumer demand for clean products. And
Mhm.
when people learn what's really in the stuff that are in our households, people look for cleaner alternatives, and manufacturers will respond to that demand. They already have, and they will continue to do so as long as they're required or forced somehow to disclose what's in those products. And that's what we've tried to do with our community science work.
And you've had some success. The companies are starting to make some changes. Can you give some examples?
We, we've we've tested child car seats over the years. That was one of the first products that we tested, and over time, some of the most offensive chemicals that were part of child car seat manufacturing have been phased out of use by manufacturers.
Right.
There were a lot of additives to plastics, to the foam in the seats, that weren't needed. There's still work to be done, but there's been great progress on that. We've also made a lot of progress on the linings of food cans. We've made some progress on we've made progress on car interiors and on a lot of other products.
Hmm.
But again,
That's great.
the public policy isn't there. And so the progress is going to be made manufacturer by manufacturer, and people have to be smart consumers.
Yeah, and getting the word out, because I know back when you started the Healthy Cars campaign, there was a lot of media attention. It became national news, some of the stuff you were finding out.
Consumers don't want to buy food can liners and floors for their home that have very toxic chemicals in them that might expose their families to problematic chemicals, and retailers don't want to sell them. Most manufacturers don't want to make that stuff either, but they haven't had to think about it
Hmm.
until we made them think about it. That was the point of disclosing what's in those products, because they're not required by law to disclose that. We've done the testing and the disclosure for them.
Hmm.
From what I've learned about the Ecology Center's history and the history of the environmental movement over the last 50 years, I've found that things that were done in the 1970s and the 1990s have had an enormous impact on our lives today. I've been involved in this work long enough to know that some of our failures back in the 1990s, whether it's about allowing Michigan having allowed too many landfills to open up, or to undermine the environmental enforcement regulatory structure in the state, have led to huge problems later on.
Hmm.
Difficulties in promoting zero waste practices today, or to protect people in Flint from lead poisoning.
Hmm.
So the things that we do today are going to make a huge difference in the future, and I'm honored to be able to work for an organization that tries to tries to promote healthy people and a healthy planet, and can um, help create a better world for us now and in the future.
Well, you've done a lot of great work in the 50 years you've been in existence. Thank you so much, Michael, for all your work and for being here today. It's been really valuable.
Thanks so much for offering us this time and having this great conversation.
So for this and all our Green Room shows, go to washtenaw.org/greenroom. Thanks for joining us here in the Green Room.